When I heard that Santa Monica Studio was making a retro game done in the God of War style, oh, count me in. When I was a kid, I loved scores for movies, TV shows, and video games. However, I realized it was melody over anything else. Melody was the most important thing to me and remains to this day. That means if a melody was performed by a giant symphony orchestra in a sweeping live-action space epic, or if a melody was played by a sine wave, I loved it the same. Over the course of my career as a composer for video games, I've always been fascinated by the idea of returning to those sounds of the video game consoles that I grew up on. So over the years, I just started sampling all this old hardware. I didn't know what to do with it. I just loved these sounds and sort of added them to my own personal arsenal of colors.
Sons of Sparta's soundtrack is a bit unique in that it does blend this modern orchestral and choir elements with these authentic retro sounds. When we heard that Barry McCreary wanted to be involved, we were thrilled. It was cool to talk to him about it because he grew up with these games as well. So he's familiar with the soundtracks and he's familiar with the chip tunes. We as a retro studio have done this many times. It was this awesome sort of, meeting of the minds moment.
One of the exciting things about working on God of War Sons of Sparta is getting to work with the team at MegaCat because of the authenticity that they are able to channel into their games. So when I heard Santa Monica Studio was working with them, I was really excited.
That's the biggest challenge we have. It's the first time for us working with one of the world's renowned artists. And through collaboration and critical thinking, we made our biggest challenge into one of our greatest achievements.
So along comes God of War Sons of Sparta. Suddenly, here's a perfect opportunity for me to write a love letter to not only the music that I grew up on, but the hardware that created that music.
One of the most special things about the music of Sons of Sparta is that it really makes like a good mix of orchestra, modern music, and also retro and chiptune music.
That was the most challenging part for me. How do we make it into this new genre, make it feel true to that genre, but it's still at its core God of War?
God of War Sons of Sparta combines three major elements: the God of War Greek era in the story, retro gaming aesthetics, and an epic emotional story.
Since when have you been so cynical?
Birth. So I created 3 different sonic palettes and started mixing and matching. For the elements of the story pertaining to Kratos' Greek past, I drew from Greek folk music. I brought in instruments like the kithara, the aulos. These are stringed instruments and woodwind instruments that were around in some form during the ancient Greek era. Video games, when I was a kid, were predominantly made with sounds that you'd call chiptunes today. And yet people made timeless classics out of these sounds. So I used a lot of samples and synthesis to create that retro gaming flavor. The third element is that big emotional story. I wanted to use full symphony and choir to tell that story the same way I would on any God of War game. That was really my biggest challenge in scoring God of War Sons of Sparta, was in trying to figure out how to balance these 3 different sounds into something that gave each of them a moment to shine and yet felt like a cohesive whole. So in Sons of Sparta, we have these brothers, Kratos and Deimos. I only wrote one theme. I wrote a theme for the 2 of them. Now, it might seem weird at first because we have 2 characters, but ultimately the game is about their relationship. And I wanted to have one theme that would evolve as their relationship changes over the course of the game.
What could have done this kind of damage?
Looks like they got struck by lightning.
I wanted to write a new theme that represents him and his brother Deimos as children. I realized it really wouldn't make sense to quote any of the music I wrote for the Norse saga. It didn't make sense really to quote any music from even the Greek games because they were very different stories. And when I think about the main themes of the game, I just kept repeating them over and over. Duty, honor, brotherhood. That's what this game is about.
You okay, brother?
I'm fine. We just need to find another way back.
And then I came up with this beautiful, mournful tune. Da, 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 da. There's a nostalgic wistfulness to this theme that I think is what Kratos, as an old man, would think about his own youth. It definitely has all the catchiness of a retro game. It feels memorable and inviting and exciting, and it tells you something about where you are in the story, where you are on the map, and yet it also evolves as the gameplay evolves. It changes with the story.
There's a few areas in the game that have this refrain of the game's main theme, and the way Bear uses that in each context is amazing.
You as the sound designer, as the composer, and especially as the player in the end, we have to make sure that it hits just right and it feels perfect. Because a lot of the sound design, a lot of the music essentially supports and drives the player's emotional state in the game.
Something that surprised me, like while working with the music, is just how much it could change. Just removing or adding some elements could completely change the music. Because you pull one of the elements, you pull the synth elements, and now it's like a slightly different score. You pull the Greek elements out, it's a different kind of score. So I think that was like a very interesting challenge for me because it's something I haven't really had to deal with before.
Part of the fun of this was thinking about the video games of my youth, where every area had a very specific musical feel. When you're playing an RPG and you get to the town, there was the town theme, or the combat theme, or the theme for the mountain, or the theme for the swamp, or the theme for the castle. I wanted to create that feeling with all our different environments. The idea of just having a single piece of music that played endlessly anytime you're in an area was sort of undercut by my ambitions as a writer. So we ended up combining these philosophies.
Even though the music has this retro element to it, it's still delivered in this very modern way.
It's a really tricky game in terms of figuring it out where to transition in and out of music. We didn't want to just fade out the music or fade in the music, so that took a lot of finessing. So I think it was a really cool collaboration.
How it blends seamlessly, perfectly fitting with the visuals, it's what makes the music stand out the most.
For this one, we were like, hey, can we have a few cues and build unique content from all the different stems that we have? That was interesting to me, especially when I go edit and like when I'm deconstructing a lot of the music and rebuilding it in these different ways. All the bosses like still have a unique color, like an interesting thing happening in all of them, but I also think it makes some of like the other story bosses a bit more special because they're like built in a different way.
I'm excited for fans to hear this blending of modern and retro elements in the God of War universe in a way that feels like it belongs. I think will blow them away.
For me, I want the players to feel that they were part of a big experience with the music and the sound design of Sons of Sparta.
People love the God of War games for a variety of reasons. You have this incredible combat, you have a gripping story, you have a mythological environment. God of War Sons of Sparta has all three of these things. To me, this is the 2D platformer that I've been dreaming of my entire life.